Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session called Designing a Responsive User Experience for Workforce Ready Lessons Learned. In this session, I will take you on a journey that we as the Workforce Ready folks went through in re-platforming Workforce Ready into a fully responsive SaaS application. In this process, we learned a lot, and I'm hoping that those lessons will be useful for anybody that is on the cusp of a major change. While I will take the lens of the user experience team in particular, I think many of the learnings are applicable to anybody, whether it is the product management, dev teams, or even customer success teams. To get this started, I'm going to give you a little bit of the context and background for Workforce Ready. Workforce Ready started off as an acquisition. Kronos was and is a lead in clocks, right, and in managing time and things like that. So when Kronos acquired SaaS HR in 2012, it helped Kronos expand their foray into workforce management for the small and medium businesses. Now, SaaS HR was a really flexible and powerful product, but it was pretty dated. It was also very difficult to configure for admins. It was not just hard to configure, but it was also really hard to use for managers and employees, and therefore increasing the burden on the admins as well. In order to sort of bring this up to modern times and to sort of address some of these issues, in 2015, Kronos decided to do a visual refresh for SaaS HR, now Workforce Ready. But this didn't really quite cut it. It was didn't quite make the dent that they wanted to make. So that's when the re-platforming for Workforce Ready became a mission. We realized that employees and managers, there were more and more millennials in that segment, people that were used to working on the phones, people that probably did not even have access to a computer. So making the application available on the computer, on the mobile devices was very important. And of course, to make it easy for our employees and managers to use as well. And so that became the mission, to improve, to deliver a user experience that will delight employees and managers with its intuitive, modern, mobile-ready design, and also with a fully responsive architecture so that it was completely device agnostic. So thus began Project Mercury. This project started in 2016 and has lasted for 4 years now. And we are at the close of finishing this project at this point in time. We have, certain things that made the Mercury project really challenging. Mercury project, at its start even, had already a huge existing customer base. So we had to manage that existing customer base while we were re-platforming and move them along with this change. Not just that, we were also trying to expand the product feature set into a full product suite. And additionally, as I mentioned already, we wanted to simplify the UI to empower the employees and the managers. So the classic Workforce Ready application had an architecture where there wasn't any middle layer. So the front end and the back end were sort of mangled together. Any changes that you did to the front end deeply affected the back end as well, which was not ideal. And it was only a desktop application. So for the replatforming, we basically decided that we needed a middle API layer that allowed for modernizing this front end and also allowed for integrations with third parties. Additionally, on the front end, For the replatforming, our focus was on the ESS and the MSS, that's the employee self-service and the manager self-service. And we wanted to make sure that there was one responsive UI, whether you were working on mobile phones or tablets or desktops. But we also decided that we would not touch anything to do with the admin functionality, the configuration, things like that, so that we could minimize the migration issues and configuration impacts. And we said that it would be perfectly okay for us to assume that admins will want to do their configurations on the desktop only. And as a result of this, we also said we wanted to retain as much of the existing business logic as possible and support any new functionality. So minimal changes really at the backend layer. So with this strategy in mind, we began our journey in 2016, and it was a multi-year, multi-phase, and even a multi-focus sort of a journey. And I'll bring you through these phases one by one. Phase one was all about enabling the workforce on mobile. So we decided, as I mentioned, to focus on the workforce, on the employees and the managers, because that was part of our mission to make it easier for them. But also for the fact that by addressing this part of our user base, we would be really catering to the bulk of our customer user base, because the employees and the managers were really where the numbers were. And because we were breaking new ground with mobile, obviously we took a very technology focus, also being like most software companies, very technology and engineering driven. It made sense for us to start there. So in order to prioritize, we said we would take high frequency mobile scenarios for employees. So key TLM functionality. TLM is time labor management, right? So key things like punches and entering time data, benefits enrollments, things like that. These were the scenarios that we picked to first start to convert, or in some cases produce new experiences on the mobile phone. We had a safety net, and that was that the admins and managers could still access their functionality on a separate classic workforce ready environment. So there was no impact to them, or there was no impact to anyone really, because there were two environments to use at any given point in time. So we took a benefits screen like this, which was really, really hard for most of our employees in the small and medium-sized business. Think of manufacturing and healthcare, or hospitality. There's a range of employees here with a range of technical and educational backgrounds. And so for most of these guys, we're finding it really difficult to even enroll for their own benefits. And suddenly now they had an experience where there was more guidance. You were being able to be walked through the process, and you could sit with your loved ones at home and make these decisions by just doing the whole process on the mobile phone. That was life changing for our customers. In terms of the design approach for this phase, I'd first like to give you a little bit of an insight into how we were organized. So the designers at this point, there wasn't even a central user experience team. There were just a couple designers that were embedded in engineering groups. And so they were really focused on predominantly their own areas. There were product managers driving the functionality. They were opportunistically trying to hit the ease of use goals here, but primarily parity with classic, because they had to make sure that what was possible before was possible in the new UI. That was the focus. Now for the design, all the main sort of like the navigational parts, right? The hierarchy, the navigational hierarchy, all of that was desktop focused, but everything else, from the detailed feature design onwards, was all mobile first. So that was the approach to the design, because we were really trying to enable employees and managers on their mobile phones. In terms of research and validation, because we were breaking new ground, we did extensive user testing with Azure prototypes that were specifically made for the mobile scenarios. They were loaded up on a mobile device, and customers were able to then test these interfaces and provide feedback. The desktop experience was not tested at all. So there were several positive outcomes from this. There were richer experiences. We had card views. We had more human pictures in the product, humanizing the whole experience. We had a range of typography that added interest and gathered attention where it was needed. Things like that. A base set of mobile patterns began to emerge as well. And then all that extensive testing that we had done provided a research pipeline for our continued customer collaborations. It really set us up for all the collaborations to come in the future. However, there were some negative outcomes too. Because we were designing feature by feature without a design system, an underlying design system, there were a lot of inconsistencies. Again, remember, designers were working in different teams on their own. Also, as you can see in this screen, some of the desktop experiences also turned out to be oversimplified because they were just extended from the mobile experiences back up to the desktop breakpoints. The business impacts next for phase one. Adoption of the new UI was slow. There was interest, but it was a bit slow because there were only a limited amount of features. People had to, in order to try that, either try it on their mobile phones or if they were on their desktop. For the new experience, it was a different login. For the classic experience, it was a different login, which worked out well for the managers and admins because they didn't even try the new desktop experience because they were happy to stay where they were with the classic experience. It didn't matter to anybody. However, the employee engagement did increase over time, and the simplified, interfaces, the guided experiences, help them be more empowered and do their tasks on their mobile phones. With that, we began to move to phase two, where we started to focus more on expanding Workforce Ready to a full suite. As you can imagine, the limited feature set was not really helping our sales. And, we needed to really have that full product suite available in one environment so that it was a really viable, solid experience for our customers, new customers to consider, but also for our existing customers. So at this point in time, we became heavily feature focused. So as we began to expand beyond the employee interfaces into the manager features and also some key foundational interfaces like reporting. Um, so we also began to notice that just as we were doing this conversion, a lot of the teams working in parallel were adding new features to the classic environment, already expanding on the product suite. However, this constantly created a conversion debt. So we made a decision that any new feature development would happen in the new UI, and so that we can stop this constant conversion catch up. Also, we still had that safety net where the existing functionality could be accessed either in classic or the new UI. So we still had that safety net as we were developing the feature set out. Now, in terms of our design approach for this phase, we had done all that vetting and understanding of what worked for the mobile scenarios, and we really just started to extend and apply those principles to our the rest of the feature sets as we began building that out. However, as we started working on reports and other such complex foundational frameworks, we came upon some significant challenges in just expanding our mobile strategies. So we had to, first of all, acknowledge that reports are most likely going to be used primarily on the desktop. So we had to switch our approach back to a desktop first approach when it came to reporting. And in addition to that, we also sort of came up to a limitation of our strategy of this one responsive UI strategy, because everything that was available in the reports, which had a lot of robust functionality, lots of bells and whistles, was not necessarily going to be able to be efficiently accommodated on a mobile phone, nor was there really a need for it. So we, in fact, at this point, prioritized the usage or the usage models over the system strategy and went in for an adaptive design for the mobile phone. So you had a little bit of a different experience when you went in and accessed your reports on the mobile phone versus the desktop. In terms of research and validation, however, we took a hit. Now, as a team, by this time in phase two, we had organized ourselves as a central team. We were still a really small team. And now we were not just supporting the conversions and coming up with the interaction patterns for it, but also designing new features. So this team, this UX team, was really, really stretched at this point, and there was almost no time left for any user testing to be done. So instead, what we did was every product manager set up an advisory board for their domain. And we would use those advisory boards to do a lot of research almost on a weekly basis, where we would show and tell. We would show them and walk through designs and then gather verbal feedback from the power users who attended those advisory boards. So they were proxy to their users, but they knew their users really well, and they were bringing their insight um, secondhand. But for us, something was better than nothing. Also, at Kronos Works, we did some guerrilla research. We were attending sessions and talking to some customers. We met some of the customers that had attended our previous usability testing and started to deepen those relationships. Positive outcomes of phase two. There were many more guided experiences, and those were actually welcomed by both employees and managers alike. And without too many premature patterns to hold the designers back, there was a lot of creativity that was unleashed. Designers were able to handcraft some experiences, whereas in Classic, almost every page was a report. Here now, for the scheduler, for instance, there was a completely different interface that matched what one would want to see from a schedule, instead of it being just another report. However, there was a flip side to that creativity, to that sort of a handcrafted approach, because every design was case by case. There wasn't a reuse of any code, and inconsistencies abounded. So, additionally, of course, for our engineering teams, maintaining two environments was an overhead. That safety net was useful, but it was also an overhead because they had to maintain everything two times over. In terms of the business impacts for phase two, we had made big strides towards that full suite of products. We had now a compelling story to use and to, for our prospects to talk about that single employee record from hire to retire. However, even as we were doing much better with new customers, our existing customers began to reject some of our MSS features, our manager functionality, because they felt that they were too mobile optimized. And our managers, even, for some of their complex tasks, certainly still imagined to be primarily working on the desktop. And they felt that those were overly simplified and inefficient. And so those caused some really costly resets for us. One example of this type of a costly reset was custom forms. Now, custom forms, quirky and complex as it was in Classic, it allowed for administrators and practitioners to scan a form and throw in some hotspots on the form so that then their end users, their employees and managers could go and type in. And these forms could be used for various business purposes. However, this was not lending itself to be responsive, to be available on a mobile phone or any other device. And so when the first version was, a completely HTML version, which was rejected, and then we had to sort of like strive to really hit a balance between the technology constraints and the user expectations, where they wanted to see that preview, have that WYSIWYG sort of form filling experience. And we also had to then take a moment and say, which one do we want to start by optimizing? And so we went in for the desktop here and then pulled it back to the mobile, where they would still have to switch between the preview and the form entry, the HTML form entry. So there were a few resets here, painful, and but we had to find that sweet spot. Moving on in our journey to phase 3, so now we had a nearly full suite, but there were thousands and thousands of pages in Workforce Ready. This was a really robust application, and with the number of customers that were using this, it was really hard for them to switch between the two environments. I already talked about the engineering teams feeling the pain of having to maintain the two environments. And so there was this need. And also, at that point, as customers, I'm sorry, as competitors were also advancing in their own roadmaps, it was really hard for us to sort of re-platform and yet always stay up to date or ahead of our customers. So for all of these reasons, it became very important from a business point of view to really complete this re-platforming as quickly as possible. So with this focus, we got on the speed train, and we tried to enable a factory model for replatforming pages in bulk. We wanted to also enable a single blended experience. So what that would help our customers with is that it doesn't matter whether they were using a new page with a converted new UI page or an unconverted page. They would stay in one environment and they wouldn't even really be able to tell the difference. And the other business opportunity at this point was that with all the expanded HCM feature set, Kronos decided that Workforce Ready HCM had enough to serve the enterprise customers as well. And so it became Kronos HCM, which meant that now those HCM features had to be embedded in Workforce Dimensions. So there was another blending of sorts, another embedding where Workforce Ready, the HCM feature set, was served from within Workforce Dimensions. And additionally, another way for us to speed up this replatforming was to consolidate and deprecate pages. One of the challenges with the classic interface that our customers struggled with was this monstrous IA, or information architecture, or the navigation menu. So in our attempt to hit sort of two birds with one stone, we said we would try to tame the IA, but in that process, try to consolidate and deprecate some pages as well, which would also help us in reducing, or increasing the speed and reducing the number of pages that would need to be converted. At this point in time, especially alongside Kronos HCM and the enterprise customers, we began to also have to consider globalization features, because we were now looking at customers in many different countries as well. So we had that new ask in the roadmap come in this phase as well. Again, given how small our design team was, and also given the fact that this speed train meant that a speedy development, there was a surge in the number of teams, that engineering teams that were working. We added engineers to each team, but also increased the number of agile teams that were working in parallel. And we unfortunately did not see a corresponding increase in the design resources as well. So what we had to do at that point was to really change our strategy from that handcrafted use case by use case sort of like a model to really looking across pages. At this point in time, we even hired a summer intern, a really smart summer intern, with whose help we sort of like corralled all the application pages into categories and then tried to come up with mega framework level patterns to say that all of these set of pages, we had one pattern called the CRUD page, right? The edit sort of a detail page. And then for each of those patterns, we came up with a cookbook style guidance for our engineering teams. So no matter which team was working on whatever pages, they knew that if it was this type of page, then this is the cookbook recipe that they needed to follow for the conversion. And in order to enable that blended experience that I talked to you about, where the customer would be able to see an old and a new page all intermingled in the same environment, we had to introduce a standard theme that sort of bridged between the new look and the old classic UI. So we added some CSS to sort of like, style the buttons and the table headers and the fonts and things like that, to somewhat bridge it and bring it closer to the new UI, so that there wasn't a night and day difference between the old and new pages. And to enable Kronos HCM, of course, we also started to interact with the Dimensions UX team. And we were trying to work on our design patterns in any case. And so we thought that we would work with these guys to see how much we could leverage some of their patterns into Workforce Ready as well. And in that process, also enable a more seamless experience for Kronos HCM from within Dimensions. However, in terms of research and validation, again, with all those bandwidth constraints serving many more agile development teams, we had no bandwidth left for user testing. We did, of course, try to do as best as we could. With Kronos HCM, we were able to leverage the Dimensions research team to do some research on our behalf, especially because it was of a collective benefit for both Workforce Ready and for Workforce Dimensions. However, our predominant sort of research channel was still the advisory boards. But the time that we didn't spend in doing user testing, we did spend in beginning our persona development for Workforce Ready. There were personas, marketing personas, there were workforce dimensions personas, but we wanted to have a really in-depth knowledge of who the SMB customers were in the small and medium business personas. So we began this process, again, short of time and resources. We took some creative and lean approaches to persona development too. We had workshops where we invited customers, partners, stakeholders, and cross-functional teams like support and services, all of these guys to sort of serve as a proxy to come up with some quick personas, for us to use. And this was also the first year at Kronos Works that we had a dedicated UX presence. We not only did a session that talked about the new UI and our design process and invited customers to collaborate with us, but we also had a UX room for research. So we had lots of sessions where customers huddled there and were able to actually put their hands on the software and give us feedback. We, in fact, had so much participation and excitement that we were sometimes, really full and spilling over in those sessions. And a customer, in fact, even mentioned to Aaron that that was the highlight of the conference. So it was a really big sort of a success of our, not just our UX sessions, but our direct sort of connection with our customers as well. So several positive outcomes from this phase as well. We started to develop those mega patterns that hit almost 80% of our application pages. And so it really, really fueled that speed train, that business mission that we were on. As a result of all of these pattern development, our design system began to evolve. Our harmonization sessions with dimensions also helped sort of like leapfrog this as well. And then for the first time with our persona focus and all of that, we were able to bring that into our IA, our navigation menu, which now was organized by persona. Um, through our journey, we learned a lot more about the importance of these personas, but more on that later. As always, there were also some negative outcomes, right? There's always a flip side. And so, to our factory conversion, right, while it gave us speed, while it gave us that speed of replatforming, it reduced our ability to enhance some specific use cases. I think it's always a hard, sweet spot to attain as a user experience team. So, for instance, here's a job requisition page. This is where a recruiter lives. But at this point in time in our journey, it was just another report. We added the ability to act on some of those, those report-like screens. And in certain other reports, which were true reports, there were no sort of like, it was truly information consumption at that point, not action oriented, but the same frameworks, the same patterns supported both of those. We use the same reports and lookups and things like that as well. So the other negative was that while we again served a bigger market, increased our revenues because of Kronos HCM, it also diluted our focus on the small and medium markets and the hourly worker scenarios as well. Business impacts. So, in terms of the business impacts for this phase, we were able to offer our customers a solid suite now where they didn't have to switch and toggle and bounce between environments. They had one full suite with our blended experience. And that was much more of a viable solution. Our existing customers had the ability to stay in Classic or move to the new blended experience. Um, but they so they were still able to make that choice, but once they were in the blended experience, they were able to experience both of those. So all of these choices really cushioned their transition as they familiarized themselves with the new experience piece by piece. And there was definitely an uptick on the Kronos HCM deals. This slide will give you an indication of that. So there were over 100 workforce dimensions customers, bringing up our customer base to 3,300 plus. The average employee size per customer increased. We were in 85 countries, 7 languages, etc., and some really impressive customer logos and stats here. As we completed our replatforming, as that big conversion train chugged along, and there were a lot of people feeling exhausted and tired and jaded, even just outputting things based off of a template. However, it had to be done, and we moved on to the next phase, which was chasing adoption. And here's when we had to sort of like, bring back our focus on the customers, because now it was the moment of reckoning, the moment of change, right? They had to act, and we had to really focus on them to see how we could motivate and coax them to make that change. So there were several cross-functional efforts and initiatives, and the product and the UX teams were involved in a lot of these activities as well to sort of like foster adoption. There was also a new team that came into being. It was called the incubator team. And this team ran experiments within the product to see how they could either investigate where there were stumbling blocks for adoption, or to see how they could overcome it by running experiments. And then we also started working on several new high value features like charting, dashboards, analytics, things like that. So beyond classic parity, things that would make the customers feel like their effort for change was really meaningful and added value. We also wanted to make it as easy on our customers as possible. So we, in addition to having provided them this ability to work on both environments all the while, we added feature toggles so that they could easily just switch something on or not, try things out, go back to their familiar environments, come back, stuff like that. And then, inevitably and finally, maybe we started to focus on the admin, because the admins were the drivers for change within any organization. And we came to that realization perhaps a little too late, but we now added a feature set called the support chat. So these were targeted primarily or only at admins to help them with any questions so that they didn't have to spend time trying to find answers or on the community or enter a support case and wait, but really get their answers instantaneously. We also worked on several admin and practitioner experiences and enhancing those, and added in context and help, and even sort of like admin tip sheets for any new upcoming release, or even an HR event like a benefits enrollment period or a performance review period, things like that. To support our mission in this phase, we, as the design team, got this incredible opportunity to sort of like step outside of the product UX and think about the customer experience as a whole, to sort of like collaborate with other teams like the incubator and the customer success teams. We were talking every day with customers. We had a podcast following Kronos Works where we talked about the new UI. We were working on things like the feature tours, things that really helped adoption rather than just domain related feature sets. And as we moved into this high value, experience oriented messaging for our customers, we also saw an opportunity for the UX team to do more proactive, design driven sort of like exercises and activities. And some of the newer features started off with design rather than design coming in at a much later time. So here we have an example of Amy. Amy is our Kronos artificial intelligence engine, and we were working very closely with the engineering and product management teams to really bring these visions to life. And as we were working on these advanced features with analytics charting, pivot analysis, design became a very integral artifact, or played an integral role in first imagining the experience and then enabling it, or even becoming a way of thinking about our algorithms, our models, and how to support that. So it was a truly collaborative sort of a phase from this point on. In terms of research, we had a really major UX presence at 2019 Kronos Works. After the success of the previous year's Kronos Works small UX room that had been spilling out with the customers, we had a large room. We had 10 sessions. We had a slew of moderated, unmoderated, and interactive sessions, which we called arts and crafts sessions. Things like that at Kronos Works. It was a huge success. We got a lot of feedback on the designs that we were working on the new UI, what was working. We got a good pulse check on how things were going at this Kronos Works. Outside of that, we did a lot of surveys on community, and we continued our persona development, where we began initially with that quick and dirty personas. In meeting so many customers and in having all of these interactions, we actually learned a ton, and we had some dedicated in-depth interviews to then sort of solidify all of these personas as well. Internally, too, we started to do a customer journey map exercise where we talked to nearly every cross-functional team that is part of Workforce Ready to understand how it all comes together, what enables this customer experience, and where were some of those pain points, where were some of those break points. So we really, at this point, as a UX team, had a depth of knowledge, both in terms of our customers, their motivations and their drivers, but also internally in terms of what we were doing well and where some of the areas of opportunities were. And all along the way, as customers had begun to slowly adopt, there was lots of one-on-one sessions that customer success managers set up with the UX and the product teams for customers one-on-one to say what was painful for them as they changed stuff, what was not working, or what did they love about the new UI. And so these one-on-one sessions were also extremely insightful for us to slowly gather insights and patterns for what we needed to tweak in the new UI. Positive outcomes from this phase. Of course, there were many more richer experiences. Again, the conversion train had sort of like, drained a little bit of those creative juices for a while. But now some of those old visions, of different pieces of functionality in different domains were coming back to life. Onboarding and pre-boarding is an example where we had a vision for a while, especially after Kronos Works and things like that, that we had collectively, collaboratively sort of arrived at with our customers, but it was really waiting to be taken and tackled beyond basic interfaces. But now we had the time and the opportunity to sort of like execute on some of those things. And then, as I mentioned, that whole shift from UX to CX, customer experience, that was a huge positive outcome because now we were collaborating with a lot many more people and taking a lot many more perspectives, not just helping them in their work, but bringing that through the product into the product experience as well. One of the main things that we did to enable that was the personal experience project, or Ready Connect. So that this project sort of laid the foundations for a more persona-based experience where we could deliver an experience that was just right for a persona within a certain workflow. Until this point in time, the classic experience and architecture was a one size fits all. So given the range of users that we had from, really, really inexperienced, sort of like, either senior or very young employees to the power users, the administrators and super users, it was really hard to have one experience that worked for everyone. Now, finally, we had the plumbing to sort of like, start to think about these personas and their unique needs. And we were ready because we had done all of this persona work that really helped us, jump on that opportunity. With the personal experience project, it's really a panel. So first of all, it's a dashboard that welcomes you with the tasks that you have to do today. So it's personalized for you. But as an administrator, it also gives you certain topics. Like, for instance, how do I get prepared for quarter end? So it's a list, it's a checklist that runs you through that. And as you go through the checklist, it actually navigates you to the page where you need to do that task. So it's a checklist that follows you around, holds your hand, and gets you prepared as an administrator to make sure that process runs smoothly for your business. It also brings the community, helpful links and information into the product in a contextual manner. And also a live chat with Kronos support so that you can instantaneously get the help you need when you need it. So really also, happy that this received the Stevie Award for, the personal experience, not just enabling, not just being a great employer that Kronos has always been, but also enabling other organizations through these methods to be great employers themselves. So, in addition to all of those, we started to be able to work on, things that customers had been asking for a while now. The classic experience had some theming capabilities, in fact, at a really granular level. And as we re-platformed, as we were going through all of those phases, we had removed all of those theming capabilities because we were not able to offer all of that at the same time as we were putting some of those foundational structures in place. So now finally we were able to not just address that need for the customers, but also delight them, right, with several themes and and think about delight in addition to just basic usability. Of course, there are, as always, some negative outcomes as well. And one of the realizations was that our focus on the power users came too late, just when we needed them to act. Until then, our focus had squarely been on employees and managers. And that was in response to our mission. But our mission statement, too, had been so focused on employees and managers that we had really sidelined our power users. And there was another really big problem that we had, and that was our inability to really track product usage because we didn't have a tool like Pendo or Mixpanel. Google Analytics offered some limited insights, but so in many cases, because of this lack of product usage insights, we were not able to necessarily always predict and anticipate and prepare for feedback, but rather sort of react to it. In terms of business impact, we had a steady growth of new customers. But in terms of our existing customers, the adoption was still slow because change management was a big overhead for our customers. There was a lot of untapped high value features because they were still just focused on the basics and the effort of just migrating from one platform to another. And then in all of this, the power users were really dragging their feet and getting angry even because they felt that the new UI was optimized for the end users, but really made their lives so much less efficient, especially on the desktop. And then at this point in time, especially in the SMB market, the admins are wearing multiple hats, right? And so they are usually either alone or working in very small teams. And so for them, their efficiency and the sense of expertise is really important. But now with so much of the new experience, they suddenly lost their product expertise, and they were now having to produce all kinds of new training material, all kinds of overhead for them. And so they were really unconvinced about the rationale for change, especially because it was not efficient for them. And that brought us inevitably to our the current phase, which is the factoring the power user, and our realization that forever we focused on a lot of things, on technology, on the business, on the features, on the customer even, but we did not necessarily focus on personas, and it was hurting us. So finally, we started to have that persona focus. In this space, we were still pushing for the adoption, the date. We'd given them a lot of tips and tricks, lots of help along the way. We had a very long sort of trial period. We kept the two environments open. But finally, we were beginning to advertise a date by which, there was a looming deadline. And so there was a lot of angst and anxiety for the customers at this point to finally make that switch, to rip that Band-Aid. And as that was happening, that resistance too started to increase, that really the power users started to dial up the volume in their resistance. And we had to really win them over. If we wanted this to be a smooth process and not lose customers in that process. So we needed to empower our power users as well to manage the change itself, right? To win them over and then to help them manage the change. Um, and and we also, of course, in all of this, wanted to retain not just the customers, but our customers' first brand. And we wanted to maintain that customer satisfaction as well. So remember that re-platforming strategy that we began with that I shared earlier? We really took a close look at this and said, what is it that is making it so hard for our power users? Why are they so unhappy? And it dawned on us that we had missed a very important part in our strategy. And that was that first things first, we had missed a whole persona, the practitioner. So in many cases, the practitioner was also the admin, but the practitioners are those that not just configure, but they live in the software day in and day out. They are the people that are your HR generalists. They are your payroll folks that are running payroll every week or month or whatever the frequency may be. And so these are the guys that are constantly in our tool. And yet we had made it all be focused on the employee and managers. And even for the managers, as I said, there were some complex sort of scenarios where just, a simplified mobile experience was not good enough for them. So we realized that yes, we were on the right track with the employees, but we needed to make some tweaks for the manager. We needed to account for the practitioner so late in the game, but we did need to think about them as well. So, in terms of our approach, we started to focus on practitioner experiences and started to try to develop some quick efficiency patterns for these guys. They needed the compact views, they needed the density on the desktop, they needed to compare stuff together, they needed to work in batches. These were all the new things that we started to acknowledge. For our practitioners, and we started to work on these things. And we also decided at this point, thinking about personas and their needs, it was best to start by telling a story, to say how these our interfaces will be used in real life scenarios, and then working the vision for it and the detailed designs for it. And in order to have this persona focus, we had done all of this work in creating the personas. We created these gigantic posters and put them in every office location, so that they were there as part of your thought fabric. In conference rooms, as you were thinking about things, we had lanyards that we distributed to teams so that they can use that and say, I am this persona and I'm bringing that perspective. We put the persona information on a SharePoint, which was accessible for the entire organization. We worked with pre-sales and marketing to see how we can bring our personas together so that no matter whether it was the start when we are using personas for our demos or when we are building products, we're thinking of the same personas and working through them. And this is how we thought about making the personas an organization-wide tool rather than a UX artifact. And then we also started to increase our observation of our users using our product and doing more usability testing rather than the show and tell advisory board sessions. Because what users were telling us were sometimes different depending upon when they were giving feedback versus when they were using the product. However, when we observed their use of the product, we got much more of a nuanced insight into their true needs. And then we did continue some somewhat painful sometimes those one-on-one feedback sessions as we were still making these sometimes late accommodations and addressing some of these pain points. We were trying to manage the customers by really letting them know that we were listening and giving them their time one-on-one. Positive outcomes were definitely that the experiences were becoming much more tailored, and we were not doing a one size fits all. We were also breaking some silos and even getting down into the architectural level, right, to break these silos and support some of the common workflows. The recruitment talent workspace is an example where the recruiter can stay in this workspace no matter whether they're initially sourcing or whether they're working the job recs or checking out, or going through the hiring funnel to sort of like, move candidates through that funnel and then schedule interviews, make their offers, and all of those things by living in one workspace. Uh, and then we also started to really recommit to that SMB sort of requirements. At this point, the merger had happened, and there was an establishment of our go-to-market strategy where Workforce Ready was again the flagship product for the small to medium-sized business. And so we reconfirmed our commitment to this segment as well. Negative outcomes, of course, was the late refactoring, right? So we were refactoring late in the game, almost the 11th hour before the switch. And we had a lot of post-release customer management to do. Because every release, we felt the customer angst, and we were managing that. So there was really, quite a journey, with multiple phases. We are coming upon the last sixth phase, which is flipping the switch. But we made it, and it was an emotional journey. Just to take a moment to acknowledge the journey of the teams internally, of the UX team. We started out not being even a team, just embedded as resources, and then sort of like, doing the best we could, responding to what the teams need, just supporting them. Then we became a team. We started to gel, we started to do our work. But we were stretched thin, we were small, and the designers were happy to be able to do good work and have all of these opportunities, but they were really stretched thin. And then even thinner when it was a speed train, because we had big analysis to do, dozens of teams to support, really spread thin. And not all teams necessarily knew what it meant to work with user experience, or what it took to do design, or how much it needed to be factored into the planning. All of that was happening as the train was just moving along at at a really lightning speed. And finally, when it came to the adoption phase, it was also enriching as it was to interact with the customers and learn more. We were learning a ton, all of that. The team was still small, and we were still trying to do our very best. We were working and trying to work with our engineering partners to make sure that we didn't sort of like add burden and weight to a mission that was already nearly impossible. And yet we were hearing our customers loud and clear that one size does not fit all. We were hearing that some of the decisions that we had made along the way for various good reasons were really not acceptable to our customers. And it was humbling sometimes to even know that some of what we thought was best practices, or what we even heard from our customers, was indeed not what exactly they needed in the end. So we had to sort of like really be able to take all of that in our stride, and now look at it as a new opportunity where we are able to drive design. We're able to sort of keep that creativity, bring that back for the use of our customers and for our business, and to help make this transition at this point in time. So it's a really emotional journey. I think it's important that the team gels together in order for them to stick to each other, to help each other, support each other, and for the UX team to sort of like have a flexible, pragmatic approach where they balance both the business mission and user advocacy. I think we did not try to force the organizational maturity towards user experience, and we sort of went along the ride trying to move that needle as best possible. And that's also what kept that morale high in that process. So definitely something for everyone to think about their teams and how to maintain the morale, because there was definitely times in this big exercise where we were all feeling pretty low. So on that note, some chief takeaways and lessons learned. Number one, The replatforming strategy is actually a starting point, and it's going to inevitably change. So being flexible is really, really critical to that success. You can see how many times we pivoted here in our journey. And not just a user experience, the whole organization was nimble and able to take in all of these risks and adjust as needed. And that was what contributed to our success. Two, the replatforming strategy should enable, not impede the customer. In our case, I think to a certain extent, we did find that we needed tweaks, right? Our one single responsive UI strategy across all the personas, it drove some engineering efficiencies, but it did cause customer angst. Also, we need to look at use cases and then think about whether it needs to be desktop optimized or mobile optimized, even though it might be one responsive design. And also, in the end, we always need to prioritize the user needs over the system strategy, like we did for reporting, where we ended up going with an adaptive approach. Three, admin buy-in is critical to the success of any new UI conversion. Remember, when we did the customer journey map, we came up with this realization that customers buy with end users in mind, their managers, their employee base. But adoption and success is determined by the practitioner's buy-in or the admin's buy-in. So we definitely should not ever forget those guys. And so even though we empowered our employees and managers early on, and our customers were thankful for it, Workforce Ready suffered because we ignored the power users for too long. Change is hard, so we need to brace for that initial resistance. It's not going to be rainbows and unicorns. So any change, even if it's for the better, is actually going to be first met with resistance. But you as a UX team should never stop listening. So in the SMB market, especially, the admins are super stretched. So change is a big, big overhead for them. And suddenly the old UI that they had even been complaining about actually seems like a really great thing for them. And so for us, it's really important then to listen carefully and understand and distinguish the real pain points from the reaction to change. We may, and we certainly would not have gotten everything correct, but we need to listen and make those adjustments. But a lot of it is also having the strength to sort of like stand by why you did made those changes, and sometimes just give enough time. At Kronos Works in 2019, we had people complain about the changes that we had made to the information architecture, to the navigation menu. But even as they were trying to tell us about what they liked about the prior navigation, they had already forgotten, and they said, "Oh, I guess I've forgotten what it used to be like, and I've already gotten used to the new one." So sometimes it's just that the habits have take time to form, or new habits definitely take some time to form. And as a UX team, I think the focus, we always want things to be as intuitive as possible, but we need to focus on learnability. Most of these things need some amount of training. We want to keep the learning curve as low as possible, but we want to try to focus on learnability with consistent interaction patterns. Five, change management should potentially be something that you start thinking about from the beginning. For us, it was a bit of an afterthought. It came a little bit later than I think it was ideal. So, and even as a design team, thinking about change management and whether you're just changing something for the sake of, or is there a good reason? It's really important to think about it. As an integral part of your considerations. Also, it's important to think about, potentially using some of your artifacts as a way to help customers connect the dots between the old and the new. We also rationale. Everybody wants to understand why before they can embrace something new. So we did podcasts, community posts, webinars, things like that. Those are really important to rally customers towards the change that we are trying to make. Six, cross-functional internal buy-in is just as critical for a smooth customer rollout. So all that rationale that we were talking about, whether it's your engineers that are building something different from what was already there, or it is your support guys that are on the phone with a customer who is talking about the change and complaining about it, they all need to rally behind the rationale and understand why we're doing it and present one picture. Otherwise, the customer is just going to be confused and wonder why they should make the change if the internal Cronites are not rallied behind it. 7, focus on the experience over features and parity. This is hard, especially as we're developing roadmaps and trying to prioritize things, you know, but replatforming is not an everyday opportunity. It's a major change, and this is the time when customers too are going to have to make a major change and need the motivation and an enhanced experience. And there can be nothing better than that to motivate people to make the change. Also, if the experience is not better or equal, they are not going to want to make that change, right? And starting with the experience sometimes can make it seem like it's adding complexity, especially from a technical perspective, etc. But it will reduce the costly resets that we suffered in many occasions during our journey. 8, make it easy for the customer to tap the value of the new experiences. So customers, everyone wants to feel like they are, drivers of innovation, but especially in the small and medium-sized businesses, the admins are nose deep, just keeping the business running smoothly with the basics. So they count on they value those old habits and their familiarity. So unless there's already something that they can quickly jump on because they've already configured, it's already there, ready to go, right? It's going to be really hard for them to adopt those deep investments and that all that effort that we as an organization have put in for the sake of our customers. 9, customer feedback on designs may not match their reaction to the product experience itself. This was a hard lesson we learned. So we had advisory boards almost on a weekly basis. Every step of the way, we were showing our customers our designs and working through iterations together with them. But this was all show and tell. They were reacting on behalf of their users or even on their own behalves. But it was their opinion. They were processing it and giving us opinion. When we listened instead and observed them using, we learned a lot more about why they needed certain things. What were some of the mistakes that we had made in the conversion as well? And then we also understood that we needed to test more than we validate. It's not quite the same when people don't put their hands on your system, when they just look and talk about it. Last but not least, don't lose the forest for the trees in the thick of replatforming conversions. So all of this chunking, thinking about widgets and features and pieces and parts, they may all be good for grooming, for agile development and all of that, but the sum of the parts is not always the whole. We learned that hard lesson through our employee profile as well. So when we did the conversion, the employee profile has 90 plus widgets on it for the employee record. And so we had product managers thinking about each widget, and they were all from the different domains. So there were lots of moving parts. So it became a very widget by widget conversion. And then when we said we were done and we released it, we got a lashback from our customers about the experience. And that was because we really had not done enough to think about how the employee profile is used as a whole. Having said that, and there were a lot of hard lessons and all of that, but in the end, this was a project well done. This was a replatforming exercise that was done in parallel to expanding the suite, in parallel to becoming Kronos HCM, in parallel to a merger with integrations to Ultipro, right? And all of these amazing stats that you see here, right? The revenue more than doubled. We retained our customers at 90, over 93%. And our revenue retention was also exactly where we wanted it to be, or nearly exactly as we wanted it to be. And so this was really a project well done in the end. I think the learnings were an integral part of why this project was a success, because we were able to adapt and adjust to that. In the end, I would like to leave you with this quote from a customer, because I think in this customer roller coaster, which is what the replatforming is, the quintessential reaction is, I don't sound like it, but I do like you guys. You guys always help me out. So that sort of a remark seems very sort of like in between, but really that's an A plus, because customers are also going through a major change, and its change is really hard and difficult. And when they recognize that you are in the end still trying to help them out, it's a job that you've done well and you've earned your stripes. Hope this session was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please do reach out to me at malini.rao@kronos.com, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.